Yes, I'd like to get your idea, Tim, on an 18-month or 2-year perspective on the hot tech areas that you're currently watching now, whatever area that's in, social networking, CRM, IT infrastructure.
I guess I should pick up a mic too. So there are a couple areas that I've been watching of late. As you heard in my bio, cloud computing is one area that I tend to spend a lot of time in. I also do a lot of speaking on it, talk to a lot of folks who are using it, developing technology within it, whether it's companies on the sales side of the equation or consumers on the other side of the equation. So I think cloud is one area that we'll have to watch evolve. If you look at how it's evolved just in the last 12 months alone, there's been a phenomenal amount of change that's taken place in terms of how people are using it, what it is. The one thing I'll ask is please don't ask me to define it. I think there's plenty of other folks that have spent a lot of cycles on that. Another area, as you mentioned, is social networking. And I think social networking is an area that will become more interesting, especially when you talk about the enterprise space over time. The real question is going to be how are we going to effectively use it? And I want to emphasize it, effectively. And this goes true for cloud computing too. It's a novel technology, it's a novel concept, but can we really use it effectively within the business? And then the third thing that I would say is pretty much kind of a catch-all for me, areas around energy efficiency. Energy and natural resources are going to be more prominent, especially as we start talking about how corporate social responsibility plays a role in the corporations today and moving forward. So I think areas that talk about energy efficiency or find ways to work more efficiently and more effectively will play a role. And we've seen examples of that just over the last 12 months alone with the downturn in the economy. People are rethinking some of the assumptions that they might have made in the past and said, gee, do we really need to kind of work this inefficiently, or is there a better, smarter, more cost-effective way to operate? So those would be the three areas I would look at.
Does any of the other panel have any more comments behind that?
Sure, I'll add a few things. My area of familiarity is on the consumer side, consumer internet in particular, so I'll sort of focus on that. And I'll borrow from kind of a concept that was introduced by Fred Wilson, who's a prominent early stage VC and blogger in New York. He mentioned what he calls the golden triangle of the consumer internet space right now, and then I'll expand a little bit on it. So he describes it as mobile, and I would broaden that actually to be more than just mobile, but alternative access points, which could be living room technologies for internet access. It could be a tablet computer, et cetera, in addition to kind of more traditional mobile devices. Social media, as you've described, and real time being the third point of that triangle. Whether that's real-time communications, real-time news, real-time content consumption of various sorts, or real-time kind of your real-time status. So information going in various directions. I'd add a fourth there, although a square may not be as sexy as a triangle. I'd throw local in there as well, in addition to mobile, social, and real-time. And there's lots of overlap between these things, by the way. There's obviously some correlation between, for instance, the mobile and the local topics. So if you want me to pick 4 themes that are big on the consumer side, in the next, say, 2-3 years, those might be 4 of the things I would highlight.
Hello. Right. So we have a slightly different perspective. We are. I'm primarily involved right now in facilitating technology transactions, mostly patent sales and technology asset sales. And so we get to see what types of transactions are taking place on a global scale. And we also work with the buyers, and we know what they're looking for. So the things that we see a lot of activity in right now are anything to do with electronics, wireless, telecommunications, those types of areas are very hot areas. There are other areas like semiconductor is still a lot of activity, a lot of buying activity, and a lot of companies in China are looking to source new technologies to manufacture products to bring them back to the US. And so there's this growth of those companies in China that are looking for those technologies in all types of areas, including automotive and other areas. But we're increasingly seeing demand from China and in India and other countries for the green tech type stuff, any energy efficiency type technologies. So those are kind of the hot areas. We also, because patents are some of the assets that are most readily traded, and patents are kind of weapons of litigation, our business, we get people looking for patents in areas where there's been a lot of litigation. So, you see flash memory litigation, then we get a lot of buyers coming along saying they want to buy flash memory patents. So we kind of have that angle as well that we deal with, as well as the general kind of technology trends.
So being last, I don't have much to add here, but I think as we look at kind of the consumer sector and the enterprise sector where we focus on, I think Erik captured the consumer space very well. We're spending a lot of time in mobile and in local. I think that convergence is really going to change things dramatically. But even on the enterprise side, Tim talked about cloud computing and open source. I think what we look for is, well, there's a paradigm shift that happens with something like mobile, and you look at smartphones and the iPhone and what happens there. If you look at the first ripple effect from the companies like AdMob or Quattro, Millennial, I guess, whether it's mobile advertising or local search, we look for those first order derivatives, and I think that's what we're spending a lot of our time focused on. If you look at some of my investments, I'm involved heavily in the video space. I have a company called Uyala, which is a video publishing platform company, or Spotza, which is in video advertising. I look for, okay, YouTube happens, what else is going to change based on that paradigm that's changed there? And that's what I spend my time on. So I think we've covered all the areas.
Mark, I'm going to ask you this, start with you on, what is a software company today?
I think a software company today, if you just look at the changes that have happened, even in the last, I've done venture capital now for 8 years, and then I used to cover public companies for about 4 years prior to that. But if I look at the essence of what software is, really, it still is solving a customer's pain point. It's just the model has changed, right? If you look at whether it's the delivery mechanism, if you think about software as a service, and you can buy, you can consume software on a monthly basis, you can consume it in the cloud. I think the delivery models change, the payment models change, but essentially, how it's delivered and how it's consumed doesn't really change the fact that you have to solve a pain point at the end of the day. I think for software companies, you think about when they get started, when I started probably 10 years ago and I looked at companies which were getting started, you probably needed about $20–25 million of capital to build a true software company, and that's kind of minimum table stakes. But if you look at what companies need right now with open source, with Amazon Web Services, with the cloud, you can get stuff started in your basement, truly in your basement, with a minimal amount of capital. So I think that's what's changed. I think that's what's really exciting as you look at the environment. But the fundamental need to solve a customer's problem hasn't really changed. It's how you deliver it, how you create it, how it's consumed. That's what's changed.